One of the most prevalent barriers that people have to reconnecting with God is that feelings just come and go. And I'm here to help with this. But before we get started, I wanted to tell you that I'm part of Whereyouare.church. It's a church that helps people reconnect with God through our practical content and our growing community. And our name communicates that God is right where you are. You don't need to go looking for God because He's right with you already. More than just your geographic location, by the way. He actually knows your heart. He knows where that is right now, and He desires to meet you precisely right there. And not only that, but our name also communicates our heart. And it's that we want to be wherever God is. We want to follow Him in His pursuit of people, and we want to be right in the center of His activity in the earth. So that's why we're making these videos, because we've come across a ton of people who really struggle to connect with God, and we just want to help. So let's talk about feelings. Feelings. A lot of people say that it's tough to stay close to God because their feelings come and go, and after a while of going up and down and being hot and cold, eventually they just sort of give up. And I get it. Feelings are powerful. Feelings are important. I believe that God created feelings and that they're good. We need to be in touch with our feelings, yes, but they're not meant to lead our actions. They should actually follow our conviction. I want to say more about that. Because what we're really talking about when we say that the feelings just come and go is the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators, right? We're talking about the difference between the things that influence us and reward us from that which we see and that which we hear and that which we experience. Things that are coming from the outside and working their way in. Those are the extrinsic motivators versus the stuff that we've thought deeply about and that we hold as true and important and deep within us. Things that come from the inside and work their way out. Those are the intrinsic motivators. These intrinsic motivators I like to sum up as the word conviction. These are convictions, right? A conviction in its broadest sense, I'm going to give you the definition, refers to a strong belief, a principle, or a value that someone holds firmly and deeply, right? It's a state of being convinced and fully persuaded. In other words, if something becomes a conviction, the feelings will come from within. They'll be intrinsic motivators. And I get this deeply because I've lived this, like 100%. Extrinsic motivations and motivators have been my experience. For my entire high school experience, I was led by them. I did whatever felt good. I did whatever I thought other people wanted me to do. You could have dropped me into any environment and I would have been swayed by what the people in that environment wanted. And as a result, I happened to be in a pretty bad environment. I partied, I abused alcohol, I wasted all of my money on cigarettes and drugs and booze. I spent my time going on benders and breaking the law. I literally should be dead or in prison. I had no strong convictions other than that it felt good to have fun. And I didn't know what I believed. I didn't take time to learn or think deeply about anything. I was living in the moment. And I went with the flow. Everything was extrinsic, trying to get its way in. And what I found is that a lot of us do the same thing when it comes to our connection with God, right? We catch an inspiring sermon clip from TikTok, or we listen to a new worship song that moved our heart, and it reminds us for a moment about how good God is, and we decide, oh, I'm gonna go to church this weekend. And then we wake up on Sunday, and we're just not feeling it, so we end up staying home. Or maybe it's not like that for you. Maybe you did start going to church, but after a while, it just started to feel repetitive, and you started to lose steam, and instead of pressing on, you were like, it's just not worth the effort. And I just want to propose an alternative way of looking at it. I grew up in Maine, and Maine is very cold, especially in the winter. During the winter, Mainers are crazy. They like to do insane things like snowshoe or cross-country ski or ice fish, right? This usually involves going out into the frozen wilderness in the night and making a camp before the activity takes place. And I've been in many of these kinds of camps, believe me. And I've had many experiences, one in particular that taught me a huge lesson about extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. One night, a bunch of us guys were having a huge winter bonfire, something we did annually. But this year, it was below zero, and it was windy, and it was snowing. And what's interesting about this is we had a tradition of being shirtless for the first fire of the winter. And additionally, we had another tradition of cutting down a fresh young pine that we would burn just for the sake of aroma, I guess, and because it's just hardcore. guys do stuff like that. So there was this one catch though. The newest guy had to be the one to go out and cut down the tree by himself, and he wasn't allowed to wear his shirt. I know it's crazy, just hear me out. Being shirtless in the winter near a fire really isn't a big deal, actually. It's actually quite easy. You're not cold whatsoever. You feel great. The fire keeps you warm. As you drift away from it, of course, things change. You grow cold and you get numb. You're 100% dependent on the fire. So what about that poor guy who has to go out and get the tree? He's obviously going to get cold and numb. I was that guy my first year, and I learned something. You can create your own heat by staying in motion, right? If you keep your heart rate up, you will be able to generate enough heat. And for me, that wasn't much of an epiphany at the time. It's just what I had to do in order to execute the task and not freeze to death in the process. But the epiphany came on that night I was telling you about, that below zero, windy, snowy night, because my friend Joel was there for his first time. And Joel went out to do the tree cutting, and time passed. And I was kind of looking around, I'm thinking, man, where's Joel? It's been a really long time since he went to go get the tree. I wonder if he's okay. So I followed his tracks out to the woods. Mind you, I was shirtless. And there I'm walking along and I'm thinking, oh no, these tracks are mostly filled in from the fresh snowfall. It had been over an hour since he had went out. That's like twice as long as it should have taken. And as I came up on him, I realized what had happened immediately. He chose a tree that was real short, but it was really, really wide, and the drag was just way too difficult for him because of the extra surface area. Combined with all the extra snowfall, it would have been a lot of effort for 3 guys, let alone 1 guy. And impressively, he had gotten about 50 yards along, but he was too exhausted to keep going. And when I found him, he had taken this really long rest, and with the wind drying up, his sweat, just like the wind dried up his sweat really quickly, and his heart rate had dropped, his body temperature had dropped, and he was in like this critical place. He was hanging in there. He was like too stubborn to just let the tree sit and come in and tell us that he couldn't do it. But he had started to make his own heat by shivering. And I realized I needed to help him get moving again, so I grabbed him, got him to his feet. I was like, we're gonna do this together. We grabbed the tree, and the 2 of us dragged the tree back to the fire. Success. But that's when it hit me. You see, going to church, listening to sermons, worship music, all that stuff is like being close to the fire. When you're in it, it keeps you warm, right? But as you drift from it, you start to get cold and the numbness starts to set in, right? If you do nothing, eventually you succumb to that numbness. In other words, numbness is another way of saying that the feeling goes away. But if you have conviction, you can make heat even when you're far away from the fire. It requires you, of course, to stay in motion, constantly moving forward in your convictions in order to keep the heat. So that's what we're talking about, is forming a strong conviction. That way, no matter what happens, you're good. But forming a strong conviction isn't something that you can just rush, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take thought. I want to give you some steps that you can take to speed up the process. We're going to go quick. The first one is to do your research. Like, really think about it. Look into different sources, perspectives, read stuff, watch stuff, discuss it, especially in order to get a well-rounded understanding. The next one's like it. Think critically, right? Analyze the info that you find. Ask questions. Consider the strengths and weaknesses of different arguments. I know this takes work, but believe me, it will help. The next one is to get real-life experiences, because experiences, as you engage in activities, these will provide valuable insights that will reinforce what you know. And then talking to others is the next one. Having open and respectful conversations with people, especially those who have different views, can help challenge your thinking and lead you to even deeper insights. Next is to reflect on your values. It's like the time you take to go back and review and think about it in light of what you've learned. Consider how your convictions align with your core beliefs and your values. Next is to trust your gut. Pay attention to your instincts. Like, sometimes they're leading you in the right direction. Don't just ignore them. And then also be patient. Remember, this is going to take time. Don't rush it. Just allow yourself to take time to grow and learn. And then the last one, and I'm saying it last because you'll remember it first, it's number 8. You got to decide. You just have to make a decision that you're going to form a conviction about who God is and what God has done. And then based upon those 2 things, who you are and what you should do. Jesus said something really profound in John chapter 14:6. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then in John 8, jumping back, verse 31, he said something else. If you hold to my teaching, you really are my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What's Jesus saying? Jesus is telling us to hold to his teaching, which is another way you could say, form a conviction about me. And if you do it, it will set you free. Free from what? Free from the feelings coming and going, from being swayed by the highs and the lows, free from being a slave to the people and places and problems that so often knock you off track. Form a conviction about Jesus, and then the rest will fall into place. See you next time.